UFC Nashville is a little over a week away, and the UFC is kind of on a roll here with the fight nights. I want to say this is the third consecutive one that is outside of the Apex, which is always a good sign. Main event with the heavyweights, Derrick Lewis taking on the up-and-coming prospect, Tallison Teixeira. And so in this video, I'm going to be going through and giving my full card predictions, talking about every single matchup, main card, and the prelims, who I think wins, and how I think they get it done. There will also be timestamps in the description if you guys want to jump around to certain matchups. Would love to hear your thoughts. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe. But we are going to start off here with a lightweight fight between Mike Davis and Mitch Ramirez. And it's kind of cool to see Mike Davis staying active. He had been in some fun fights, had looked like a interesting player in the weight class. But from 2019 to 2024, he only fought a total of 5 times. And this will already be his second fight in 2025. Now, admittedly, he's not coming off a great performance in his first fight of 2025. Kind of just a weird fight from him, some questionable fight IQ going up against Faraz, but even coming off kind of a tough performance, this still feels like a mismatch here against Mitch Ramirez. Mike Davis is 4-2 in the UFC. His only losses are to very solid competition in Gilbert Burns and Faraz. He's a super well-rounded fighter, averages almost 2.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, 44% takedown accuracy, but then also has some juice on the feet. 7 of his 11 wins are by knockout. On the other side here with Ramirez, he's coming off a loss in his UFC debut to Thiago Moises. He's actually been out since March of 2024, so taken over a year off since that UFC debut. He was honestly a fight that was not super competitive. He was pretty thoroughly out-grappled. He got his legs beat up badly and ended up getting finished via leg kicks. He has an 8-2 record. His only other loss was actually a knockout loss to Carlos Prates on the Contender Series. Primarily a striker, pretty dangerous on the feet, 5 knockout wins, 2 submission wins, but a lot of those wins are against pretty low levels of competition. And even some of the guys had like decent records going into the fight. But when you actually watch the tape and you watch those matchups, like he's not going against even like super great, interesting names on the regional scene. So I do think Mike Davis is just the better, more well-rounded fighter in this matchup. I think he's going to stifle the early explosiveness of Ramirez with his grappling, and I could see him finding a finish in like the second or third round. I'm going to go with Mike Davis round 2 submission, but I do think he's also live to win by knockout. So I think he gets back on track and finds a submission win. Then going all the way up to heavyweight, we have Kennedy and Nzechukwu taking on Valter Walker. And these are 2 very different types of heavyweights. For Nzechukwu, he's a pretty high-level athlete for the weight class. Big dude, 6'5", 83-inch reach, very powerful. But he's not going to be one of these big heavyweights that kind of just like lumber around and are fat and like have to cut weight to hit 265. Like he's probably going to come in a decent amount below the heavyweight limit, but he's gone 2-0 since moving up from light heavyweight, and has found some success in this weight class where there's not a ton of depth. And I think until you're getting into like the top 10, maybe even like top 7, top 6. Like I think he's going to have some pretty decent matchups against a lot of these dudes. On the other side here with Valter Walker, also a very big heavyweight, 6'6", with a 78.5-inch reach. Definitely not as explosive, not as great of an athlete as Kennedy and Nzechukwu, but I do think he's going to be like the physically larger man when they are in there. Kind of a miraculous stat. He is coming off of back-to-back heel hook wins in the UFC. Like you rarely see heel hooks, and like especially at heavyweight, he averages nearly 5 takedowns per 15 minutes, landing those takedowns at a 70% clip. The problem is that he has really been unable to get his ground and pound going. So despite landing a ton of takedowns, he's only averaging 1.79 significant strikes per minute in his 3 UFC fights. And he lost his UFC debut in a fight where he went 4 for 5 on takedowns and racked up like nearly a round and a half of control time, just straight up because he was not able to land anything of significance on the ground. And so Kennedy Nzechukwu does have pretty solid takedown defense, 81%. Now, admittedly, he hasn't been tested with someone like this large and physical in the heavyweight weight class. But even if he does get taken down, like I don't think he's going to get held down. I don't think he's bad enough to get heel hooked. And then Valter Walker just hasn't really proven that he can effectively land that ground and pound to stamp rounds or land the ground and pound and actually have the cardio to last 3 rounds. So I do think Nzechukwu is going to get this one done. I think it might be a slow start. Valter Walker trying to clinch, trying to take him down. I think as Valter Walker starts to fade, I think that's where Nzechukwu is going to pull away, and I think he finds a knockout win in the second round. In the next matchup, we have Chris Curtis taking on Max Griffin, and I'm really excited to see Chris Curtis move down to 170. I think you can definitely make the argument he should have done it sooner. He's already kind of getting up there at 37 years old, but he came into the UFC, had a lot of early success at 185, but he was just consistently fighting dudes that were bigger, rangier than him. You look at a lot of his losses, and it's just like very apparent that these two guys should be in different weight classes. I am a fan of Chris Curtis' style. Very boxing heavy, sees things very well defensively. His takedown defense had been really solid up until his last few opponents, where it's kind of slipped a little bit. But once again, he's going up against dudes that just have like a massive size advantage against him. And he can be patient, potentially overly patient at times, but he also can push a pace if he wants to. Like, he's landed at least 140 significant strikes in back-to-back 3-round fights, which is like pretty insane volume, especially up at middleweight. For Max Griffin here, he's close to a 500 UFC record, 8-9 in the promotion, 2-3 in his last 5, also getting up there in age at 39 years old. He's a pretty well-rounded fighter and just doesn't really do anything all that special. Like, he has some pop on the feet, 8 knockdowns in the UFC, can grapple, like 1.37 takedowns per 15 minutes. Not great defensive wrestling, 69% takedown defense, but don't expect that to be a huge factor in this matchup because Chris Curtis typically just going in there looking to strike. Doesn't fight at a super high pace, averaging under 4 significant strikes per minute. He has been pretty durable, only finished 2 times in 31 pro fights. And like, he's gone up against some tough dudes, went to decision against Michael Morales, who's just like going out and nuking everyone. I do expect this fight to take place on the feet. Like I said, don't think Chris Curtis is going to come out and wrestle. I don't think Max Griffin is going to have the grappling to be able to take and hold Chris Curtis down. I do have like a minor concern in this matchup for Chris Curtis's chin, just kind of making that cut to 170 later on in his career. But I think if he doesn't get clipped early, I do think he just outclasses Griffin on the feet. I love his boxing. Like I've talked about, he is pretty defensively responsible. And so I think he pulls away, lands a decent amount of volume on the feet, and I think he wins a nice decision. Then also at welterweight, we have Jake Matthews taking on Chidi and Njokuani. These are two guys who have kind of lacked some consistency with their performances. Matthews' last few fights, even the ones that he's won, have felt kind of flat. He's pretty patient on the feet, averages under 3.5 significant strikes per minute, but he's also very defensively responsible, 2.63 significant strikes absorbed per minute, 61% defense, which is a very solid number. He can grapple, but hasn't really gone to it a ton as of late, only 2 takedowns in his last 7 fights. And then, like I said, like, he's been safe, but he's also not going out there and landing a ton of damage. Like, there have been 0 knockdowns either way in each of his last 4 matchups. For Chidi and Njokuani, he has real danger factor on the feet. He has finished 3 of his 5 UFC wins. He hits hard, but he's also mixing in dangerous knees, elbows. The concern here with Chidi and Njokuani is his cardio. Like, he clearly does not trust it. If he hurts someone early and doesn't get them out of there, he's very likely just going to be cooked because he's going to burn all his energy. And then if he doesn't hurt someone, he tends to fight at like a very low volume pace, and he'll still fade in those later rounds. So I think you can see like multiple outcomes for this fight, where you can certainly see that if Jake Matthews just stays safe, kind of outpoints Chidi and Njokuani, lands, a little bit more volume, but stays safe, doesn't get clipped, you could see him winning a decision. I could also see Chidi and Njokuani going out, finding an early finish, or just winning on some big moments like we saw with Matthew Semmelsberger. Like, Semmelsberger knocked down Jake Matthews, I want to say 3 different times in their matchup en route to a win. I am going to lean towards Chidi and Njokuani. I don't think he's going to find the knockout, but I think he's going to have the ability to land big enough shots where he can kind of swing rounds. Because if Jake Matthews is going to go out and fight at like this pretty slow pace, just kind of try to outpoint dudes, I think Chidi has the power and the danger factor where he can rock him, he can drop him, and I think that's how he stamps fights en route to a decision win. Then the first women's matchup on this card, we have Fatima Kline taking on Melissa Martinez. I think this is a pretty extreme mismatch here. For Fatima Kline, I do think she is going to be a legit player in this weight class. Like, I think she's going to climb her way into the rankings, could potentially fight for a title someday. She is 7-1 as a pro. Her only loss was a short notice fight up at 125 against Jasmine Jasudavicius. Like, that is just a really tough ask for someone making their debut and on short notice. She's only 24 years old, pushes a very high pace, a very, very solid grappler. For Melissa Martinez, she is primarily a striker, does throw like a solid variety of kicks, can be dangerous there, but I do just think she's going to be out of her depth with the grappling coming in here from Kline. So I'm going to go with Fatima Kline by decision. Another women's matchup, Lauren Murphy taking on Eduarda Moura. For Lauren Murphy here, she has not fought in 2.5 years. She is 41 years old, coming off a very dominant decision loss to Jessica Andrade. Now, I'll give her props. She is a tough, durable fighter. She is not going to quit on herself, but she doesn't really have like a calling card anywhere where like she doesn't really excel in one specific area. She's not a great striker. Even in a lot of her wins, she's getting outstruck, can't consistently get her grappling going, but like she's going to try, she's going to work, she's not going to give up, which counts for something and can help you win like some of those more competitive, close decisions. For Moura here, she is a dominant grappler, averaging 4.4 takedowns per 15 minutes in her 3 UFC fights. I think she's even more interesting up at 125, like not killing herself to cut down to 115. And I think she has the potential to get into the rankings, potentially make a run top 10, top 5. I'm going to go with Moura here by decision. I could see a finish, but Lauren Murphy has just been super durable throughout her career. Her only loss by finish came against Valentina Shevchenko. And you look at that Andrade matchup, like Andrade obviously has a ton of power. She landed some huge shots and Lauren Murphy just ate it. Now, it's also possible she's just super physically diminished at 41 years old, but I do think it goes the distance. I think she survives, but I do think Moura picks up the win. Then we have a potential fight of the night contender here in Nate Landwehr taking on Morgan Charriere. This feels like a fight that Charriere could win early, or if it goes into the later rounds, that's where Landwehr could kind of pull away. Charriere is a super explosive striker. Both his wins in the UFC are by knockout, but he's kind of tended to fade in the later rounds, and both the fights that went to decision in the UFC, he lost them. Nate Landwehr absolutely thrives in chaos. The dude is an absolute dog, will not quit on himself. The fight that I think has to come to mind with Nate Landwehr is when he went up against David Onama. Looked like he was going to get nuked in the first round, somehow survived, and then came back. He's like hyping up the crowd, wins the second and the third, ends up winning the fight. He can get caught. He is a little bit chinny, but he also has some great recoverability. The main concern that I have with Landwehr is just how rough he looked in his last fight against Doo Ho Choi. Not saying Doo Ho Choi and like Charriere are like super similar, like the same type of fighters, but you could kind of see the case where Doo Ho Choi, super explosive, dangerous on the feet, could have some success early. Landwehr builds as Doo Ho Choi kind of starts to fade. Choi has some durability questions, and like you could have seen the path for Landwehr to win that fight. And man, Doo Ho Choi just like put it on him, picked him apart on the feet. Landwehr just looked super slow. He was like using this high guard, was getting ripped to the body, just couldn't get out of the way of any shot that Doo Ho Choi was throwing. And then he looked super slow trying to explode in, trying to get into range. And then you also would think he had the grappling advantage, and Doo Ho Choi dominated him there also. So like you look at his age, he's 37 years old, which like isn't crazy, but he has a lot of tread on the tires. He's been in a lot of wars, both in the UFC and pre-UFC. So that's kind of what scares me here with Landwehr. I could definitely see him weathering an early storm, coming back and like finishing or winning the second and third rounds against a fading Charriere. But I kind of feel like Charriere just clips him and catches him early and gets him out of there. So I'm going to go with Morgan Charriere by round 1 KO. I would love to be wrong. I love Nate the Train in the UFC. The dude's an absolute dog. He's must-see TV, but after his last performance, I do kind of have to fade him in this matchup. Then moving up to light heavyweight, we have Junior Tafa taking on Tuco Tokkos. And to be honest, I don't really know how you trust either of these guys. Junior Tafa's 2-3 in the UFC. He's a powerful striker, dangerous on the feet, but just has zero ground game. Just one of these like typical heavyweight strikers, or like formerly a heavyweight striker, where yeah, they can knock you out early, but like once you start grappling, they're going down and they're probably going to wilt. On the other side here with Tuco Tokkos, He's looked really rough against UFC competition. He was knocked out by Minyang Zhang. He was submitted by Umar Sy. He lost a decision against Navajo Sterling. Now, he does have some grappling potential in this matchup. My concern with Tokkos here is that when you look at his last fight against Navajo Sterling, he straight up looked like he didn't want to be there. Like, it was like he was just fighting to see the final bell. He was clearly down 2 rounds, did nothing to try to push the pace, look for the finish in the later round. Like, he was completely resigned to losing a decision. And so, like, with that type of mentality in a matchup here with Junior Tafa, you're kind of going to have to go into the fire at least a little bit to try to push a grappling heavy game plan. And I just don't know if he has it in him at this point. I also forgot to mention, I do like Junior Tafa moving down to 205. When you see these dudes that like aren't super physically imposing at heavyweight and they're like not even hitting the divisional limit or getting close, it's good to see them actually show some discipline and like have the ability to cut down to 205. So I do like that aspect here for Tafa. And so like I said at the beginning, I don't have a ton of faith in either of these dudes, but I guess I have slightly more faith in Junior Tafa. I'm going to go Junior Tafa round 1 KO. Then down at featherweight, this fight could be an absolute banger here. Calvin Kattar taking on Steve Garcia. I love the matchmaking here from the UFC. And when I initially saw this fight booked, this kind of felt like the UFC was just like feeding Calvin Kattar to Steve Garcia, right? You have Calvin Kattar on a 4-fight losing streak. He's fighting outside the rankings. Steve Garcia, although he's not super young, I think he's like 33 years old. Like, he is on a tear in the weight class, younger in his MMA career, 5 straight KO wins. And so it kind of felt like, all right, Steve Garcia is just going to come in here and he is going to run through Calvin Kattar. When you break these guys down, like stylistically, this is a fight that I think is pretty favorable for Calvin Kattar. And like, not saying it's like an amazing matchup for him, but like, he's kind of going to get to fight the fight that he is fairly comfortable with. When we look at his back-to-back losses since his knee injury against Arnold Allen, he was just thoroughly outgrappled by Aljamain Sterling. And then he was outpointed by Youssef Zalal, who really just like used a ton of lateral movement, was just picking at him. And Kattar, with like his boxing heavy style, couldn't really cut him off, didn't have the kicks to, you know, punish him for like all the movement. And so he struggled in that matchup, had a good third round, but like was already down 2-0, and Zalal was just like, you know, shuffling across the cage for the last 5 minutes. And so like, the grappling, don't really think that's going to play a huge role in this fight. Garcia hasn't landed a takedown in his last 6 matchups. And then on the feet, like, I think stylistically it's interesting. Garcia is a super aggressive southpaw. He hits very, very hard, as you can probably tell. Like 5 straight KO wins, even against like outside the top 15 competition. That is still very, very impressive. He also works the body well, digs there with his left hand, also has a very powerful left kick that he'll go up high or to the body also, but he is not super defensively responsible. He is pretty reckless. He can be clipped on the feet. He was faceplant KO'd in like 2 minutes against Mahashate. He was dropped in wins against Nurdanbekov and against, I think, Charlie Ontiveros. So like, he is hittable. There are going to be openings here for Calvin Kattar, and Calvin Kattar, I think, is a lot cleaner on the feet. I don't think he has the same raw power as Steve Garcia, but I do think he's a little bit more technical, a little bit more defensively responsible. I know it might be shocking to hear me say that, considering the fact that he took like 445 significant strikes against Max Holloway, but like, Holloway's just a freak. He's a different animal. So Kattar has a nice jab, throws straight shots. He digs to the body, really long 1-2, where like he can really explode into range and catch dudes that like potentially don't even think they could get hit. And then also some nice elbows. You saw him KO Jeremy Stevens with that, landed some nice spinning elbows and just other elbows on the feet against Giga Chikadze. And then also has really, really solid cardio, like proven 5-round cardio, can go the distance, and then also very, very durable on the feet. His only knockout loss of his career came by injury against Arnold Allen. And like we saw, I mentioned the Max Holloway fight, the dude took an absolute beating and was still somehow in there and has fought in subsequent matchups and, you know, been fine in terms of his durability, obviously outside of the knee injury. And so I think both guys have the potential to knock the other one out. I do think Garcia has the power advantage, but I think Calvin Kattar has the durability edge. And so I kind of do prefer like the defense, the durability of Calvin Kattar. And now it does kind of go against like the general philosophy of like, You have an older fighter on the decline going up against a younger fighter, kind of rising up the rankings. More often than not, the younger guy gets the job done. But I am going to back the veteran here. I'm going to go with Calvin Kattar, and I think if he's winning this fight, it's probably by finish. Sure, he could win a decision, but just with the way Steve Garcia fights, it's not super conducive to going 15 minutes. So Calvin Kattar round 1 KO is going to be my pick. Now, going up to heavyweight, we have Vitor Petrino taking on Austen Lane. We had a heavyweight going down to light heavyweight in Junior Tafa with Vitor Petrino. We have a light heavyweight going up to heavyweight. Now, for Petrino, he is very physically gifted. He's just not that great at MMA, right? Like, he kind of rose up to get a shot at the top 15 just with his raw physicality. He has suffered back-to-back losses in fights where he was a minus 550 favorite and then a minus 310 favorite. That is insane. I don't know if there's another fighter out there that has lost back-to-back fights as like greater than a 3-1 favorite in both of them. But now he's making the move up to heavyweight. He's a very powerful, explosive striker, still only 27 years old. For Austen Lane here, he's pretty much like a bottom of the barrel heavyweight, is pretty big for the weight class, 6'6", with an 80-inch reach, but he is 1-3 in the UFC. His only win was just like a super wrestle heavyweight performance against Robelis de Spain, who cannot grapple. And then he has been knocked out in all 3 of his UFC losses. So I am going to pick Vitor Petrino here. I'll go round 1 KO. I will say, though, like Vitor Petrino is currently minus 700 in terms of the betting odds. I don't know how you think Petrino's like a 7-1 favorite after he just blew 2 fights as a huge favorite. And moving up, it's heavyweight. Anything can happen. Like Austen Lane dropped, was it Mario Pinto, who's like an interesting heavyweight prospect in his last fight. So like Lane's not awful. There are pathways for him to win this fight, could catch him on the feet. There's no way I'd be betting Petrino at minus 700, but I do think he should be the favorite to get the win here. And then I believe this is the co-main event. We have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Gabriel Bonfim. And this is kind of sad because this is like Wonderboy officially entering the like, hey, we're going to have you fight this top prospect out of the rankings. And like, we're hoping you lose so this prospect can kind of get a bump in the top 15. Gabriel Bonfim, 17-1 pro record. He has finished 16 of his 17 wins. Majority of those are by submission with 3 KO wins. Now, when you hear someone like has finished 16 of their 17 fights, I feel like you imagine they just have like this super aggressive, relentless style. That's really not the case with Bonfim. Like, he's fairly patient, but obviously any sort of, opportunity presents itself. He's super dangerous as a submission threat. We did see in his one loss against Nicholas Dalby, he like came out hot, but just really, really faded and ran out of gas. I think he got finished in the second round. So maybe he learned, going to be a little bit more patient, kind of pace himself, but he's still pretty unproven. Like, the best win of his career is probably Chaos Williams, and I think he's listed as like a minus 400 favorite. When we look at Wonderboy, he is 1-4 in his last 5, coming off a KO loss to Joaquin Buckley. I will say, pre-knockout, he was very competitive in that matchup. Wonderboy can still hang on the feet with literally anyone in the weight class. Like, he is still a very dangerous striker. He's so clean. He's smart. He's like that tough karate puzzle where he throws these great kicks, kind of has these smart, intelligent blitzes. The big problem he's had has just been like avoiding the takedowns. Joaquin Buckley, even though he knocked him out, still took him down 4 times. Shavkat took him down, submitted him. Bilal landed 7 takedowns. Gilbert Burns, like Wonderboy was winning the exchanges on the feet. Gilbert Burns would shoot and he would find the takedown. He'd find the clinch. 3 takedowns in that matchup, which led to the Gilbert Burns win. So like I said, Bonfim is a minus 400 favorite. That seems kind of crazy. Like in Bonfim's last fight, he was minus 225 against Chaos Williams. And I do think there's a path where Bonfim kind of goes out there and kind of accepts like the lower volume striking match. I'm not saying it'd be like his optimal strategy, but like Wonderboy can kind of lull these guys into these like fights where they're just going point for point with him, trying to strike. And so like I think there are ways where Wonderboy could win this matchup. I'm not completely counting him out, but it also just feels like at any point Bonfim or like his coach is like, dude, just like get in there and get after it, where he can just force the clinch, work his takedowns, and like really threaten with the submission. So I do think Wonderboy like has a shot in this matchup. I don't think it's the worst stylistic matchup for him, but I am going to go with Bonfim. And I guess I'll probably take him by submission. I mean, if I think he's going to get the grappling going, based on him having 13 submission wins and 16 wins, like he'll probably find some success there. We've seen Wonderboy get submitted by Shavkat Rakhmonov. So I'm going to go with Gabriel Bonfim. We'll go round 2 submission. I will be hardcore rooting for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, but I can't, give an honest prediction that I think he's going to win this fight. And then we have arrived at the main event, Derrick Lewis taking on Tallison Teixeira. We have Tallison Teixeira in a main event with 35 seconds of UFC experience. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about heavyweight and how weak it is, I don't know what would. But he is a massive heavyweight, 6'7", 83-inch reach, very young at 25 years old. Heavyweight needs some young contenders. There's not a ton of super intriguing guys making their way up or who are already in the UFC. So for the sake of the division long term, you kind of do hope that Tallison Teixeira does have something. He hits very hard, throws head kicks, had an elbow KO in the clinch against Justin Tafa, but he is still very, very green. He is very untested. He's 8-0 and he has never left the first round. So does he have a chin? Does he have any cardio after 5 minutes? We truly don't know at this point in his career, which could be dangerous going up against a guy like Derrick Lewis. Lewis has been out for over a year. His last fight was in May of 2024. We have kind of seen him struggle versus legit top 15 competition, but when they've tried to sneak these dudes in who aren't as established, he's picking up wins. He's 3-5 in his last 8, but has wins against Rodrigo Nascimento, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and Chris Daukaus. We all know Derrick Lewis hits like an absolute tank, and I actually think he has some underrated offensive wrestling. He doesn't go to it a ton, but we saw him really try to wrestle Tai Tuivasa, had some success. Is that something he tries in this matchup? Try to get into the clinch, try to take this behemoth of a human down. I do think it would be interesting, but he's 40 years old, getting up there in age, had to pull out of a fight due to a fight night sickness, which is not great. And so it's always possible that Derrick Lewis lands a huge shot, finds the knockout. Teixeira is untested, like I've said, but it's tough for me to pick against him here. Everything we've seen from Tallison Teixeira has just him being dominant, running through guys. Derrick Lewis can get knocked out. So I'll go Tallison Teixeira round 1 KO. But if this fight night ended with, a vintage Wonderboy performance and then a Derrick Lewis knockout, I would not be complaining. Would kind of be fun to see these veterans get big wins. Don't expect it to happen, but would be cool to see. But that's going to wrap it up for my UFC Nashville full card predictions. Let me hear your picks down below. If you enjoyed, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.